The Wrestling with Emotions podcast presents movie night. The Wrestling with Emotions podcast presents movie night.
Hey guys, welcome in. Happy Halloween season. Today we're looking at another movie. This time we're talking about VHS Halloween. It just came out, I want to say Friday morning, Friday night, or whatever you consider it. But it just came out. It's on Shudder, streaming exclusively currently on Shudder. And we're going to kind of dive into that. Just want to give you a quick update from a channel perspective. Thank you to those who have been watching and tuning into a lot of the figure reviews that I've been putting up. I do plan on putting an additional one up relatively soon, maybe even the same day this drops, for a Halloween-related figure from Terrifier 2, the Sienna action figure from Trick or Treat Studios. I think it's 5.5 inches tall figure, articulated. I haven't taken it out of the package just yet, but I do plan on doing so, I think. And that's kind of the challenge. I was wondering, because I'd like, and we'll look at this when we actually talk about the figure itself, but I'm for the most part an in-package collector. But I'm having to make some more tough decisions, I think, when it comes to what I'm going to keep in box and what I'm not, just because I'm starting to run out of space in my current setup. And a lot of the figures that I have, especially the ones from NECA, the horror ones that are not Universal Monsters, I think those are ones that I can probably do fine by taking them out of the package. And I think they'll actually look a lot better when I do that. I'm torn because a lot of times when we're talking about figures, I'm trying to think of who Super 7. And I know we're getting off topic here. But Super 7 to me displays better when you look at like the Ultimate figures. And even some of the reaction style figures display way better in the package versus out in the open. I mean, the reactions without a doubt save you an incredible amount of space if you take those out of the package. But for example, and we're going to do the room tour before the end of the season, I have a whole set of the Super 7 Universal Monsters, one over 20, close to 20 plus figures, all in package. The art is awesome on these figures, and there's a nostalgic piece for me because I mean, I remember picking up the first set that came out, the second iteration, I think, of what they had done originally, a few years back at a Creature of the Black Lagoon showing at the Alamo Drafthouse in San Francisco. Super 7 is local to there, and they had a booth set up. They sponsored it. They did Halloween candy buckets of the creature heads, so I still have those. But it was a really fun time. It was the first time I've been to Alamo, and my wife enjoyed herself as well. And, there's a piece of history tied to some of these, so I don't want to just take them out of the package. And like I said, some of them don't stand well when you do take them out, the reaction figures. But long story short, we're going to go into that and hopefully get that video up relatively soon. With that said, we are still creating wrestling content. I am just at a loss for words of kind of what to say at this particular point, and I don't want to just continue to fill out hours or minutes of content on topics that I'm not exactly passionate about, because I think it absolutely comes through in the conversation. And if it's boring for me, I'm sure it's excruciating for anybody who's even trying to pick it up for the first time, which of course would leave a bad impression, which of course would diminish the chances of anybody actually subscribing to the shit and listening to it. So today we're talking movies because I do enjoy those. And especially today's movie, we're talking about anthology-based horror. Now, if you're not sure what anthology-based horror, to me, it's my favorite genre of horror movies, I think, possibly, next to slashers. And essentially, probably slashers are probably my favorite, much like many, many, many other folks. But I like anthology movies, especially some that are around like the found footage style. We'll talk about that a little bit. But essentially, when you're talking about when you're talking about anthology movies, there's a what they call like a frame narrative. It's a solid standalone story that kind of frames the rest of the entire story, and then you get little pieces throughout, different short stories that eventually tie into the main narrative of what you're talking about. I think there are some movies that do this way better than others. We'll talk about that in my review. This will also be a spoiler review. I'm going to go through each one of the individual films, the 5 short stories that they have here. A lot of them are really good, I'll tell you that. I will say that much. Really well done. Now, if you're thinking about anthology horror, I mean, the first ones that kind of come to mind for most people, especially of a certain age, is going to be the like Creep Show, where you have all these individual stories centered around it. The movie starts, if you remember, of a kid who gets in trouble with his dad. His dad's not Tom Savini, Tom Atkins. I think slaps him, takes his comic, throws it in the trash, and that's our central storyline is around this little boy, and the stories come from the comics, and eventually, in the end, the dad gets it. But with that said, I think they do that's a amazing movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. The look, the colors, the special effects, which we'll talk about in relation to some of the other movies that have come out recently and that I just can't get into. Well, actually, why don't we just talk about it right now? The This is going to sound like an old man, but I think when it comes to horror movies specifically, because I think it can be done well in other contexts, but the use of CGI and digital graphics in horror movies is awful. It completely took me out of the It remakes. Um, those had so much promise, especially after the first one, which wasn't as intense, I don't think, in terms of like the CGI that was used. But part two was an absolute mess, in my opinion, when it came to CGI. And it wasn't that it was a bad movie. It's just that when you are looking at something and you can tell exactly from looking at it that it's a digital version, it takes the scare out of what's supposed to be scary. I guess is the easiest way to say it. Um, so the good thing about this movie is I can't notice a lot of CGI, which is great. Um, I'm trying to think of a comparison recently that I could say that with, but I think it's good in that sense that you're not getting a lot of that. There does appear to be a lot of practical work in this, and if it is CGI or digital based, there is a sheen because obviously a lot of these movies it's supposed to be VHS tapes, so you're able to kind of dumb down the quality to an extent, and I think it hides some of the crimes that might come from like a digital format if you're doing effects like that. But again, practical is always the way to go in my opinion. When in horror, obviously, in some many cases, it could be more expensive, but the ultimate outcome is always better. When it comes to continuing on the anthology, this is, and I don't want to sound like that guy who got in on the ground floor, but many years ago, I was following. When did this come out? Back in 2013, I remember the excitement around All Hallows Eve coming out. There was a couple of anthology movies coming around that time. I think Tales of Halloween. I think Kevin Smith was tied to that one. All Hallows Eve, another anthology movie. But this introduced us to the original version of Art the Clown. So I remember him in this movie. I remember him being part of the overall narrative that interlaced all the stories, and it absolutely tied all the stories together. Each individual um, short story wasn't terrific, but his presence and the overall story that it told to tie all together, I think was great. And I think that's what kind of really started the buzz for when the Terrifier movie actually came out. And then of course Terrifier 2, um, based on this character kind of being interlaced in those movies. So to say that I got in on the ground floor of Art the Clown, I'm going to be that guy. Okay. So let's get into this particular movie, and there are other. Let's actually. So another one of my favorites, another one of my absolute favorites, and not that All Hallows Eve is one of my favorites, is Trick or Treat. If you haven't seen this, obviously it's one of the more popular ones. It bombed. I think it went straight to Blu-ray in the beginning, but it was heavily touted, and now it's got such a cult following. It's incredible. But Trick or Treat, they do anthology horror extremely well. in that movie as well, and that's all practical, and looks terrific. Um, let's talk about VHS. So, believe it or not, if you're not a fan or unfamiliar with this franchise, this is the eighth iteration in the VHS found footage style anthology horror franchise. This started way back in 2012. Um, and in this particular one, I think it's in this is what some of these early ones do well, and that is kind of one of the things that I'll be honest, like the VHS Halloween does not do well. Is there's a central story. I think it's like criminals. I think they're breaking into a house, um, and they find and discover a homeowner that has an old guy that had died while watching a series of videotapes stacked on televisions in this particular room. Um, they're looking for a specific videotape, I believe, in that. And then so they're going through each individual tape and they're watching different short stories. So you can see where those tapes come from. In Halloween, VHS Halloween, um, again, let me just run down really quick. So you got VHS. I mean, it's almost on the year. So 2012, 2013, 2014, 2013 was VHS 2, simple. VHS 3 version 3 was called VHS Viral. That was in 2014. Then you have a 7-year gap. And I think this is kind of when Shudder took over the franchise and started to produce these. So you've got VHS 94, 99, 85, which came out in 2023. VHS Beyond, this is where I stopped watching. I think this is a lot of like space related videos. I maybe I'll give it a shot now that I just watched this, but it's a lot of like in space type videos, and that's, I mean, I don't really care for that. But I was stoked when there was one that was going to come out that was specifically Halloween. So let's discuss this really quickly. Let's get into it. The frame narrative, or the overarching story that's interlaced between the short stories, is a story called Diet Phantasma. Essentially, it's the late 1980s, and this company called the Octagon Corporation are planning to launch a new product called Diet Phantasma. They bring in multiple subjects. I can't tell. They're all wearing like orange jumpsuits. I don't think they're prisoners because there's some kids mixed in here too. But the drinks essentially are this is they're there's like ghosts in the drink. Okay. So every time someone drinks the drink, they bleed out of their eyes, their head explodes, or something nasty happens to them with whatever ghost, and then they purge the room, and then they move on to the next test subject. So those are interlaced. So you get the main story for the Diet Phantasma. You have the first test subject who dies, obviously. And then it cuts to the first video for some reason. So there's no reason to understand why we're going to these different videos. Like, what would be the reason for us watching these videos if they don't tie into the main narrative of the story? It's not like they're trying different videos as they're going through. It makes no sense as to why we would be watching different stories with this Diet Phantasma frame narrative going on throughout the show. So that's really my first gripe, is I don't understand it. It got so repetitive and redundant after a while, um, that it not that it took you out of it, but it was one of those things like you tuned it out waiting for the next story to at least start. And not that any of the acting was bad or anything along the lines. It just made no sense. And here's another trope that pissed me off. You get the first story. It's called Coochie Coochie Coo. It's about a pair of high schoolers who are graduating, getting ready to go to college, and they're going to go out for one last night, even though they're too old probably to be trick or treating. And it starts off that they're fucking getting high in a car. It's like, give me a break. So dumb that they had to include that piece of it. It makes no sense. It's just for the service of adding it in there as if it was something to do to possibly age age that particular movie. So once you get past that, these two annoying girls, first, when they're in the car getting high, three trick-or-treaters come by and smack on the window, say you're too old, and that the mommy will get them because they're too old. So we find out as they're going about the night, they're going to go trick-or-treating, they're messing with people, they're stealing candy from kids. There's being a bunch of pricks running around this neighborhood, continuing to get high, continuing to fucking steal candy and eat candy. They're dressed as babies as well. Um, and as they're going, they start to, overhear like parents talking or whatever, like about a cheerleader who was missing from last year. And then they talk about that and they just kind of blow it off. And then all of a sudden, they come across a house that essentially almost appears basically out of nowhere. You can see there's a lot of pulsing lights coming from the house, but they eventually go in, um, and it's a woman essentially offering them candy. They go inside and then getting trapped. And then throughout this house, you see just a bunch of like um, babies running around. Essentially, they're adults dressed as babies, and their faces have like cherub cheeks and shit like that. So it looks very weird. Then there's this overarching mommy character, um, who eventually I think they discover was once a woman who became pregnant as a result of a rape. She then kills herself and her unborn child to escape the forced motherhood. Um, Thus, she beckons victims, this is from Wikipedia, to become her children. So you see all these children, you see the cheerleader in the house, another man who I don't think they really explain what he's doing there, and um, just a grotesque amount of nursing stuff. Like there's milk everywhere, there's pumps everywhere, it's all sticky and gross. It reminded me of a essentially somewhat of a barbarian knockoff, where mommy almost looks like the character in Barbarian. There's a lot of similarities to the story in Barbarian of these forced breeding situations underground. And so that one was just okay. The effects and everything were just fine. It was trippy and gross. But we again move on to the next interlude, or the first interlude. Another two test subjects die, basically. I'm going to skip past those essentially. And then we get into a Spanish one that is actually really good. It's called Ut Supra Infra. Um, I'm probably butchering that. It means as above, so below. Um, it's a story that basically follows a Halloween massacre from these partygoers that had gone into this house and summoned a spirit basically through a phone in the room. There's one surviving member of that night. His name is Enrique. And he brings the police back to this house to essentially kind of walk them through what happened. And um, all those incidents end up happening again. And each one of the it's really done well. I'm kind of rushing through it because it felt like it went very fast. But essentially, you open up to a segment where you see a lot of bodies on the ground, all missing eyes, all mangled as well, as if their bodies and arms have been broken, or just super traumatic injuries to a lot of these individuals. And he's retelling the story from the point of view of himself and then this girl who is essentially kind of like guiding the kids through the house and stuff like that. Yes, there's a phone in the room after they recant some I think that thing as above so below. Phone rings. He answers it despite this one character telling him not to. He begins to convulse as the video feed cuts out, and then when he brings the cops back to the house, um, he he reads it out loud again. This is daytime, and you can see in the room it's a very tall room. There's a phone in the middle of the room, not connected to anything. And he begins to say the thing again, and then he starts the phone rings. A cop answers the phone. No one hears anything, and then he starts convulsing again. The Enrique character, and then all of a sudden, all of those individuals float to the top of the ceiling, and there's a really cool shot of where the perspective shifts because now they're all stuck to the ceiling, and it flips the camera. And he had gone through a door on the bottom floor, and then when he went through the door, he came out through the top of the ceiling. So he's on top of the ceiling, and he collects all of their eyes. Um, and then eventually, once the thing ends, they all fall to the floor, and that's how you can tell like all the bodies were broken up from the first time from the traumatic fall. But a really cool, quick story. I thought it was really good. Um, it was to me more interesting than the first one because, like I said, the other one was incredibly derivative of Barbarian for me. We're gonna get another interlude, and then we're gonna get into a really fucking weird one called Fun Size. So again, a group of trick-or-treaters is out after they've left a Halloween party. There's a really annoying male character who had just proposed, I guess, and this chick said yes, but he continues to call her fiance throughout the entire show, and that's incredibly annoying. You're almost waiting for this guy to get killed, which he eventually does. But essentially, this group of folks, they happen upon a candy bowl with a sign just asking them to only take one. The bowl, though, is filled with all of these candies that are like not name brand candies. They're all odd names. They open up one and it's a dick. It's a dick shaped candy bar. Um, and then when they attempt to take another one despite the warning, the bowl comes to life and then swallows them up. One of the guy bites into the dick candy, and of course it's filled with white cream, which is disgusting. And then it's even worse when you realize in the future scene what it actually is. It's a real dick. Spoilers. So they all get pulled into this candy bowl by this creature of sorts. And this effect was pretty decent. I mean, it's like an old-fashioned magic trick where there's nothing below the table, but you can see this hand pulling them through, and then they all end up in this warehouse or factory warehouse. And they begin to be stalked by this candy-headed creature called Fun Size, who appears to have obviously supernatural powers. He has a small little helper as well. But throughout the movie, all he's doing as he's popping up in the factory is yelling "Fun Size." Basically, at one point, the main character, the guy who had eaten the dick, he gets pulled into a machine where he's chopped up and then turned into candy, thus explaining the dick-shaped candy bar that he had eaten previously. Everything gets wrapped up. Balls, ears, eyes, a hand with a key. And when they wrap it up, it's the person's name with some version of the candy on it. So you could see it's all people-based candy. Couple tries to escape via an air duct, which ends up turning into be a conveyor belt. This is the guy who continues to say fiance. She then admits that she didn't want to marry him. That was also a part of the story that we didn't need to know about or care about. But like we didn't that part of the story did not matter. We did not need to know at all that they were going to get married. Doesn't matter. Lauren escapes. She escapes only to be killed. So none of the four, nobody escapes. They all get turned into candy. And then later, two of the children take candy from a separate group, takes candy from a bowl. And then the son admits that he took two. Is that a problem? I remember him saying. And then the bowl comes back to life and attacks the mother and the kids and sucks them in, so it continues. The cycle continues. This was pretty decent. It was a pretty cool story. It was different for sure. It obviously had its gross outs with the dick, the balls, the chopping up machine or the conveyor killing machine. That was pretty wild. I mean, the gore and the effects in this movie in general are all like elevated for sure. I mean, there's a lot of really wild kills, if that's what you're interested in, and it's only getting to a point where it's going to get worse. So we get to Diet Phantasma, the third interlude, another subject, this time a young boy, tries one can, loves it, tries to get another, and then he ends up dying. So again, I just don't care about the interlude stuff. The next one is creepy as shit. It's called Kid Print. So basically, there's a guy named Tim. He runs an electronics store where he runs a service called Kid Print. Basically, it's a children's video ID service that helps identify and save kids that have essentially been kidnapped. Um, there are two frequent news reports of children going missing and showing up dead, and he wants to protect his two daughters and his wife. But at a so they go to a Halloween gathering. It starts out where they're basically in the video store, and you can see like a lot of kids get introducing themselves, um, their name, etc. There's a height chart and stuff like that, so you can distinctly sell it. You can distinctly sell from the videotape that it's being shot and taken inside the video store. Um, with that said, um, the next thing, he goes with his family to this Halloween party, and recently it's discovered that another group or another kid has been killed. Um, and this police officer asks him to go back to the video store and find the video for this one girl named Maria. When he arrives back at the closed video store, he discovers alternate tapes of several missing children being tortured or begging for their lives. He discovers Maria only to be attacked by his employee. His name is Bruce. Now, the video that they show of these kids in this house, in this warehouse or in the store that he's watching, it's fucking disturbing, man. I mean, skin being ripped off. Um, it is the kid. I mean, it is disturbing. Like the screaming, faces being ripped off. I mean, it is fucked up. Um, he eventually discovers Bruce. Bruce ends up beating him and throwing him into a room with the kids. The kids mistakenly identify him as probably being involved, knowing that he had filmed the original tapes. So the kids who were being held, kill him. And then essentially, basically, Bruce gets away scot-free because they pin the killings on Tim, causing his family to have police protecting their home. Bruce seems to have gotten away clean, but he makes it very clear at the end of the movie at the end of this segment, that he plans to continue on with the kid print videos. Really fucked up. That one was, I mean, the gore and everything was wild. And then, of course, they shows that the kids are still missing. We get another final 5 folks that are going through the trial. I got a family coming in. I just need to let them know that I'm taping up here. We got another 5 trial subjects. One kid actually lives. Her eyes are completely white. She enjoys the soda. She'll eventually become the spokesperson for this soda. So we're done, hopefully, with Diet Phantasma for the most part. The next thing we get is a segment called Home Haunt. Now, there's parts of this story that we just didn't need. Okay? So it starts out with a nice young family. Keith, the father, does a yearly homemade haunted house with his wife Nancy and his son Zach. So Zach is in the early videos shown to be very excited to be hanging out with his dad, doing this trick or treat haunt every single year. But then they cut to an older version where he's grown up a little bit. He's a teenager now. He does not want to participate in this yearly tradition. He's getting made fun of at school. Again, we didn't need this part of it. They could have kept it simple to the home haunt. But basically, they convince Zach to participate again this year. They go to an antique store where Keith goes behind like a rope to the back and finds this record, a music recording called Halloween Horror. So on Halloween night, he opened up the haunted house, and I want to say, I'll find out I'll find out in the second from a casting standpoint. There's somebody that looks like let me find it right now. There's somebody in this movie who looks like somebody real quick. Da-da-da-da-da. I thought it was Rick Baker, but I guess it's not. There's a guy who looks like Rick Baker standing in line to go into the haunted house. It is Rick Baker as Rich. So that's funny. So Rick Baker, if you don't know, is a Halloween artist or makeup and effects creator. He did American Werewolf in Paris, American Werewolf in London. So he's in line to this guy's Halloween haunt, criticizing how shitty everything looks. That was probably the one really funny point of the movie. Um, but basically, on Halloween night, they open this haunted house. They play that record in the very first room, and all hell breaks loose. Now, the gore and the amount of effects that they do in this segment alone is awesome. It's a great finisher for the movie. I think they did a really great job. They go into different segments of the haunted house, which awakens different things that you would expect in those particular rooms. For example, they go through a crypt. So there's a lot of zombies in there, a dungeon where people are being tortured. There's a really gruesome axe scene of a splitting of a head. I mean, that scene alone is wild. They go to a witch's house where the real witch. Several people die along the way. Keith, Zach, and Nancy manage to survive and escape outside, only for a witch to fly out and grab Zach's camera. The witch then kills two more children who are out trick or treating. The entrance to the haunted house that was a giant demon's mouth suddenly comes to life as it breaks free from the building. So they did a really great job. That's one I would watch. So I would watch some of these again in segments, like I would watch, even though it was really gross, the kid print one, because that was really weird. I mean, that could be a movie unto itself. The home haunt one was really good as well. That could be something that could be expanded as well. And then the final thing is the mid-credit scene shows a commercial for we cut the credits and then we get a mid-credit scene of a commercial for the Diet Phantasma soda, showing that subject I mentioned, the young girl from the last test. She drinks the can and says, "It's scary good how good it tastes. It's scary how good it tastes." Again, no relation to anything that takes place from the 5 different segments that we watch and see. So overall, minus that thread, I would probably watch this again, or at least a few of the segments. So overall, I thought it was pretty decent. I got out of these a while back because the effects and the storytelling got lazy to me. And to be honest with you, I think, you know, VHS 2012 and even part two. Part two is a little sloppy too. I think there's one. Maybe I'm confusing that with All Hallows Eve, because I think there's one where the woman paints Art's face. That's All Hallows Eve. But there's one with some aliens that look rather cheesy and cheap or something. But overall, I would recommend this. So if you have Shudder, or if you don't, sometimes they do like free trials, and I think it's worth it. In addition to VHS and some of the movies that are exclusive to Shudder, you're going to get a lot of content from like Joe Bob Briggs, where he reviews and looks at movies. If you're a fan of Monster Vision as a kid, that is right up your alley. But hey, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy your Halloween season. Again, I'll be back with a figure review, and you guys enjoy the rest of the day.